I qualified for Kona in 2022 on average 10 hours a week. This is because I had some years of base behind me, but life actually dictated that I couldn't train like I used to pre-kids. If this is your situation, you're on the right video. Let's face it, the biggest commodity we want is not money, but time. And when you're training for triathlon and you have a family and a busy lifestyle, we had to be very good with our time management. So that leads me into swim training. This is what I did. I only swam twice a week. Yeah, believe it or not. These 4 to 5 times a week did not do. Yes, you build really good aerobic fitness and specificity for your triathlon leg. However, the time taken and wasted for the small marginal gains that you get for the smallest part of the race, I spent it elsewhere. Make sure that that swim training was super high quality. That was the first important thing, okay? And we had to be super consistent every week without fail. Certainly for that 12 to 16 week block leading into the Ironman. I did. One swim which was more CSS or threshold based swimming, so critical swim speed. To get that pace and to understand that, you have to do a 400 and 200 meter time trial. More information on that, you can get hold of me, just direct message me, but there's a lot of information around that linked to my training plans. 400 meter and a 200 time, so I would spend about 45 minutes twice a week training, and I would tag 30 minutes of gym, because you're at the pool, you can go upstairs, really good use of your time, and I'll dive into what I did for that gym session. And the second swim, I would just do a longer one, but I would make it strength focused by using pull buoy and paddles. So those were longer efforts to build real resilience with the arm conditioning, so when you got to do your 4K race swim, you had a lot of strength built up with low heart rate training, very aerobic. But I would trash my arms, so 400s and above, long endurance, and that effort was closer to more tempo work, because bear in mind I'd only swam above race pace for these efforts here for 45 minutes of duration, so the nitty gritty of that wouldn't have been longer than 20 to 30 minutes at threshold. So I wouldn't have spent much more than 45 minutes to 60 minutes in the pool per session. Twice a week, without fail. Good quality, get in, get out, and consistent. Gym sessions, plus minus 30 minutes. Remember, tagged onto your swimming session, so you're already there, you're loose, you've warmed up, the body is nice and mobile. So I would focus on my big hitters, because I knew it had to transfer to injury prevention is the main goal here, and strength, which needs to carry over to your specific sport. Otherwise, you're just going for vanity, guns. So I would focus on, in the first session, squats, a lunge pattern, and quite a lot of one leg work. And remember, we're only going for 30 minutes, so you're in, you're out. I was never smashed when I left. If you're doing gym session that you crawl out of the gym, it's too hard. This was a little bit more upper body focused, so a bit more push exercise, some lat work. That'll help obviously with your swimming, with your running as well. And I focused on core, specifically obliques and low abdominals. Remember, you could do core all day long, but you're just going to get strong in the wrong place. Generally, it's these that get neglected, your low abdominals, and your obliques are running. So a push could be anything with weights or push-up based. Lats can be in a row position or in a pull-down position. So those are my tag-ons to really good use of time after a swim session. Now, what takes up the biggest part in your training? You know the answer here. It's the bike. Now, most of us like to ride our bike, especially when the weather's good. I never had the opportunity to be able to go for 5-6 hour rides very regularly, so to remain consistent, I had to really hone into 3 rides a week. Yeah, it was all it was, 3 rides. Sometimes I would aim for 4 or 5, but invariably I'd average 3 times a week. Now remember, we're up to about 2.5 hours already with your swim and gym. Immediately, this is going to be the bulk of your time. So I did 1 3 to 4 hour ride, closer to that part of the 3, but I made sure I had to do intervals because I couldn't just go ride easy based on the low volume. I urge you to be able to do quite a bit of race pace intervals, so that was an Ironman effort. A above race pace. So we are getting the body ready and conditioned for, again, back to specificity. So when you turn up to your event for an Ironman, it's not completely new to you. So that started at 10 minutes, built up to 30-minute duration within that. So that could be 4x10, 3x20, 2x30 minutes with some recovery in between. So getting some nice easy riding in between, and this was all done on the TT bike. So again, carrying over to the specificity of race. All right, next thing, back to this theme that I'm going with, TT strength. So about 1 hour session, I'll do this on a turbo, and we would do some overgear work or hill climbing, whatever you want to call it. It can be done indoors and outdoors. Slow, low cadence, big torque work, really carries over to time trialing really well. So the specificity is high, very good carryover, really good bang for your buck. So we would do 2, 4, 6 or 8 minute repeats at 60 to 70 RPM. And actually the heart rate stays quite low, but you're building a high power effort during that duration. And we would work 30 to 40 minutes of duration. So you could see not loads, but that was done in TT position. And then to go back to my earlier themes of never ignoring intensity, what triathletes tend to do quite regularly, we would do your classic VO2, maximal volume of oxygen uptake. Okay, so this is hard. We have to time it really well in the week. I'll show you later on. And this could be anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes in duration, reps. So again, just a 1 hour session. And in that, I might be doing 4 by 5 minutes, or 8 by 3, I think was the biggest one. So you can see 20 to 30 minutes of work, which is very hard. How hard? Well, it's a 7 or 8 out of 10 above your FTP or in the severe domain intensity, depending what zone model you're using. Remember, to get your thresholds, you don't necessarily need the gold standard, which is a lab. We want to do at least a 20-minute test to find out what your threshold is that you can hold for 45 minutes to an hour, unless you've got some data from a race or you've been outside and done a nice long time trial. And I generally work 5 to 10% off that figure. So 90 to 95% of that gives you a really good rough gauge of where your threshold sits. There's loads of different ways of doing it, but we try keeping it simple, and that served me well. Just remember to stay in the right zones when you're drying, and because the volume is low, you generally hit your sessions pretty regularly. So race pace efforts, that's your endurance, TT strength, VO2 higher than race pace, very hard. Never neglect the intensity. So that leaves our run training. Now, it's a really important part of the equation because no one wants to have a terrible run leg. The biggest thing I find with coaching is this injury, and that comes normally from volume. That, with your intensity, how hard you're running, your sessions, will define your load. And this is where most people break down, when the load's too much. So this is really important, which feeds into your overall training load for the week, which adds up cumulatively over your 12 to 16 week Ironman plan. So I kept it simple. Ideally, I'd like to run 3 or 4 times a week. It was more like 3 times a week, but if there was an optional 4th one, I'll let you know what that is in a second. So I had to make each session count without getting injured, but really being specific. So I would do a midweek sort of 12 to 15k hilly. The key is hilly tempo here. Now why? So naturally you go slower up hills, you build really good specific strength in your glutes, your posterior chain. Speed work in disguise is your hill work. So that carries over to a flat marathon really well, especially most marathons are flat in an Ironman. So it would push up your heart rate, zone 3, 4 on the hills, you'd make sure you really worked, and then recovered over the top, but kept the speed down over the descent. So actually you're running really quick, faster than race pace, but your heart rate drops down. So a hilly natural area, you just have to use a treadmill. So that was staple. Everyone does a long, steady run, but I didn't have to push to 2.5 hours, 3 hours. I think my longest run was 2 hours 20, and I only did it once or twice because I had quite a bit of volume base. The key was to add some intervals, again, to keep the theme above race pace. So it wasn't super stressful, which kept the injury rate risk down. Bear in mind, in my 40s, had to watch the calves, hamstrings, ankles get really tight. So there I would spend anything from 16 to 28 minutes of duration of repetitions at threshold pace or above. So it's above marathon pace. For me, it was 4 to 6 times 6 to 8 minutes. Okay, so obviously if I did 6 by 8, you're moving into the 40 range. I only did it once or twice. So generally speaking, I was working around 20 to 30 minutes of work at threshold. Now most people can handle more than that. I didn't do loads more, but I built up to that. Again, find your threshold, 45 minutes to 60 minutes of running as a test. Some people can use their 10K, or you can do a 20-minute test to find your functional threshold pace. A bit like you do for the bike, and then take 5% off. All right, hilly, long, steady, and the third run, which is the most specific of the lot. Getting your legs used to running off the bike. It's called a brick run, 6 to 12 Ks off the bike, and that was at race pace. That would vary in distance based on where I was in that cycle, but if I knew I could run 12 Ks at race pace off a really good, solid, long bike, I was in good shape. Always making sure you could have done more. Remember, less is more here. And because I was running out of space, an optional fourth run. Now this depends on the weekly load, where I'm at with all the other sports. Because I enjoy running, I'll just do a 30-minute easy jog. Again, no junk mileage, but if I needed just to flush out the legs on one of the days, I'd slot that in just if I had a bit more space, a bit more time. So some weeks I might have done 11, some weeks 9. I picked up sometimes to 12 hours, depends where I was. In the cycle, remember, it's a cumulative load. It's not every week perfect. So remember, the fundamentals are consistent week in and week out approach. It's no good doing 1 week 20 hours, next week 8 hours, then a big week of 15. Body loves this repetition, and if you're going to stick to 10, 11 hours, 12 hours if you can push, that's fine. That range, I believe, is pretty good. So let's look at how I tackled that structure that would give me that range of 10, 11 hours, sometimes 12 hours a week. Our week starts on Monday. That's going to be a swim and a gym. Swim and a gym session. Remember, we split the swims into only 2. So that was a threshold swim. So up aerobic, not super hard, but then you did 30 minutes of gym over there. So we got to think about the legs for tomorrow, which is Tuesday. So they've recovered from the weekend. You haven't pushed that gym there so that you can't walk out of the gym. Most important thing is you leave feeling better than you arrived. You shouldn't be trashed at the gym. Tuesday, we're going to try hit an hour, and that's the strength bike. Wednesday, we chatted about a hilly tempo run. Now that was between 12 and 15 kilometers. Duration, distance, that's pushing the heart rate up zone 3, 4 on the hills, recovering fast over the crest, maintaining speed, letting the heart rate drop, building run specific strength, really specific for an Ironman, and carries over really well, we find. Heading to Thursday, so now we've tied the legs out the last 2 days. We're going to just have a swim, but then we're going to do that strength paddles and pull buoy session. Again, 45 minutes to an hour, but these are now longer reps. Body's getting a bit tired, so the heart rate we want to keep down. So that could be 400s up to 800s, depending on obviously your ability, but we're keeping the body elevated. We're aiming at trying to get the arms pretty tired and pretty exhausted and fatigued. So when you aim yourself for the target race, which is 3.84 Ks, you have really good swim specific strength. Okay, that ties us up to Friday, VO2 bike. Now, we never want to neglect the intensity with Ironman, and certainly when we're doing less volume around this point, we want to try and get above race pace for a lot of the work. The good way to do that and to carry over is to maintain your VO2, especially being an older athlete. So again, we're aiming for 1 hour. Now this can be done in your TT position indoors, ideally, or out on the road if you feel you want to go attack a hill. Anything from 3 to 5 minutes. Now it doesn't matter how you slice it up. You could do 20 to 30 minutes of total work. Everyone has a different opinion on this. If you're not very fit, even doing 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off for 10 minutes will elicit a similar response. Obviously that's quite a lot easier than 3 to 5 minutes. Softens the legs up a little bit before the weekend, which is going to be quite endurance based with a little bit of sprinkle in there. So that's Monday to Friday. That you can see is not a lot of hours, but there are 1 to 2 sessions for some days. Now in there could be an optional run of 30 minutes. Now I like to run quite a bit, so I'll show you how that would have fitted in, because of Saturday you're going to do your traditional long ride but not be out for 5 to 6 hours. Remember, we were aiming at 3 to 4 hours here. I spent most of my time closer to that, and in there were 10 to 30 minute duration as I got fitter. Race pace and above. So this is race pace, specific race pace, so it's not super hard, but you have to stay on it. And I would also spend some time above race pace because we're doing shorter duration. That builds up real good specific strength and conditioning for a 5-hour Ironman bike. Bear in mind, that was my rough time, 5:05, sometimes a little bit just under 5 hours. So I spent a fair amount of time doing some time trial specific efforts at that pace, and my body got used to it, which would then be followed by a brick run, which is a run off the bike, a shorter one of 6Ks up to 12Ks at Ironman pace. That's quite critical. Dial into your Ironman pace, you get your body conditioned to running at that specific pace. It's slightly faster than your steady pace. You need to work that out, and someone that coaches you could do that, or reach out to me, DM me on Instagram, and we can try to figure that out for you. The fourth run I like to put in, bear in mind there was a run on Wednesday, run on Saturday. Sunday's going to be a longer run. 30 minutes, really easy, slotted in somewhere on a Tuesday, maybe as a brick run off the bike, or anywhere else in the week is optional. It depends on your hours for the week, how your legs are feeling, what your run background is, and remember it's all related back to injury, and the running is the one that gets the bad press. Sunday long run, remember we weren't going to go super far, super long. I didn't spend many hours past 2 hours 20, maybe 2 hours 30 once or twice for a longer run. So we're not talking 3 hours, 3+ that really breaks you down. But within there's going to be some above race pace intervals. So I like to do some threshold work. Now, threshold around that 45 minutes to hour pace that you can hold, and I was going for 6 to 8 minute repetitions. So you can see 30 to 40 minutes around threshold elicit a really good response within a hour and a half run. So you can see around 2 to 3 hours of running, keeping your weekly volume quite low. That coupled with the gym should get you to the start line in great shape.